Let's talk epigenetics for a minute. I'm seeing a lot on here about generational trauma and how it works in the body. And there is scientific evidence showing that trauma affects your chemistry and your DNA. So it affects the wiring in your brain whenever it happens, and it affects your DNA, which can be passed. The Bible actually talks about this. It talks about giving both blessings and passing down iniquities down through generations, and how this works. And if we don't love him, things go south, and it affects generations, the next generations. If we do love him and we live the way we're supposed to, that in turn can affect generations. So there's you're not stuck in it. So just because it's generational trauma does not mean that you're stuck with it. You can, there's some great science. Dr. Caroline Leaf does a great job. That you can rewire your brain. In turn, when you rewire your brain and your thinking, your mindset, that in turn recodes your DNA, at least to an extent. And a great example here, let me see if I can change, is dealing with the fairy world. Didn't know I was going to go there, did you? I read this little Scottish story of a woman who had become pregnant, and she went to find the man and tell him that she was with child. And she found him, and he was kind of at the door of the fairy kingdom type of thing. And she's like, oh no, right? But he's like, no, I'm human, but I've been captured by the fairies and I'm basically their slave. And he said, there's a way that you can save me, but it's going to be dangerous. And so what she had to do basically, and I guess there's several versions of the story, but this was kind of a nutshell. She had to get a hold of him at a certain time when the veil was thin. She had to get a hold of him and hang on while he transitioned, while the fairy magic worked through him and transitioned and into some dangerous things. And she had to hang on to him until all of the transitions were done, and the time had passed to be able to keep him, and she did. And it reminds me of how we help each other through these generational traumas. My husband deserves a medal for what he's gone through with me, but he's very much done this very same thing. We've all got it, okay? We all have it. Some may be worse than others, but I'm not going to downplay anybody's trauma, because everybody has trauma and everybody's trauma is their own, so, but I had a friend one time who was dealing with an issue with her husband, and I happen to know her husband, his family, better than I knew her, actually. And I said, okay, this is what he has been dealing with all of his life. And I didn't even know the depths of it, right? But I said, this is what he's been dealing with all of his life. And we go through these like dangerous transitions because when you've been rejected, neglected, abused all your life, then you're expecting it everywhere. That's what you're expecting. You hope that things are going to be great and you're going to find happiness, but your very being will unfortunately and not unintentionally try to push them into treating you like everybody else does, because that's how everybody is. And we've got this churchy religiosity trauma that people have today, that they want all Christians to act a certain way. And yet, whether they really want it or not, they're pushing, right? They're pushing buttons to see if they can get you to treat them like every other quote unquote Christian in their life has done. And we need to remember, instead of allowing, everything in this world is set to deceive and divide right now. Everything is just wired to deceive and divide right now. And we need to be like this woman who was in love with the father of her child and wanted her family to be whole. And she held on to him no matter how bad it got, through all of the transition and the trauma dumping and the, what other modern words can I put to it today? Even though he was acting like a bear, even though he was acting toxic, even though he was drinking too much, even though he was whatever it was, that the poison pouring out of his system, she held on. And that's what we need to be doing. We need to hold on. It's worth it. Okay? Now, if somebody is just truly abusively toxic, let go. There's some people in your life that don't need to be a part of your life. Okay? I have been there, had to put a restraining order on somebody and had to get them completely out of our lives because it was dangerous. Okay? Because I had tried to hold on so long with that person that it became dangerous for my children. Okay? So I had to get rid of that. So it takes some discernment to know who to hold on to and who to not, right? But when you're married to someone, and I'm sure there's situations there too, okay? So you marry that person for better or for worse, right? If it becomes dangerous, you need to remove yourself for a little bit. But just kind of, I told this friend, I said, he needs to know that you're going to love him no matter how bad it gets. And she did, and she held on to him as my husband has held on to me through thick and thin. And it got better. So I'm not saying every single situation works out that way, but if you apply discernment and apply scripture, this is how things should work. And even if that person, because you have no real control over that person's change, right? You can heal. You can let go of the trauma. And that may make even more of a difference for them. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense.